I always thought the worst my HOA could do was fine me for leaving my trash cans out a few minutes too long, until the night I found a hidden tunnel carved directly beneath my house. My name is Keith Wood, and I'd lived in this home for over 20 years without a single structural issue. But over the past few weeks, strange vibrations kept shaking the floorboards, soft at first, then strong enough to rattle tools off my basement shelves. I thought maybe it was roadwork or a busted pipe, until the concrete slab in the back corner of my basement began to bulge upward. When I brushed away the loose soil, I uncovered a gaping hole leading into darkness, warm air rising from below, carrying the smell of fresh earth and machine oil. I climbed down with a flashlight, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Support beams, cables, a generator humming, and a set of construction plans stamped with the logo of my HOA. Someone know Delilah Gray, our power-hungry HOA president, had authorized a secret tunnel straight under my property, and I was about to blow their entire scheme open. If you'd asked me a year ago whether I had any problems with my neighborhood, I would have laughed and said no. I bought my house back in my early 30s when prices were sane and life felt simple. It wasn't fancy, 3 bedrooms, a comfortable backyard, a garage big enough for my old Ford, but it was mine. I built a small woodworking station, planted 2 maples in the front yard, and spent most weekends grilling with my neighbor Tom Barrett, the kind of guy who'd lend you a ladder without you even asking. Life was quiet, predictable, good. Then came the HOA overhaul. When I first moved in, the HOA was little more than a formality, collecting small dues, funding seasonal decorations, occasionally reminding us to keep our lawns trimmed. Nothing extreme. But last spring they elected a new president, Delilah Gray, a woman with a sharp chin, sharper voice, and a smile so tight it looked like it might crack her face if she ever loosened it. Delilah treated the HOA like her personal empire from day one. She wore bright pink blazers to every meeting, carried a clipboard like it was a weapon, and delivered rule violations like she was serving court summons. She once fined a resident because their seasonal wreath clashed with the neighborhood color palette. Another neighbor got a warning because his trash can was visible from the street for 12 minutes past the allowed pickup window. 12 minutes. I stayed off her radar for as long as possible, but of course that couldn't last. The first time she targeted me was over my front yard tools. I had left a rake against the porch rail, not thrown across the lawn, not blocking anything, just leaning there while I went inside for water. 2 hours later, I returned to find one of her infamous yellow violation slips taped to my front door. Yard equipment visible, from street must be removed immediately or fined. I remember holding the slip, looking around, half expecting a hidden camera crew. But no, it was real. I threw the slip away and dismissed it as a ridiculous technicality. Then came the HOA's new beautification guidelines, where Delilah insisted all homeowners repaint their shutters in one of 3 approved shades of beige. Mine were a dark walnut, tasteful, subtle, perfectly fine by any sane standard, but apparently not community cohesive. I ignored that one too. That's when the strange behavior toward me began. Delilah would slow her walk when passing my house eyes, scanning my yard like a predator searching for weaknesses. She once stood across the street for nearly 10 minutes, just staring at my siding, no camera, no clipboard, just staring as if she was trying to measure something. Looking back, I should have realized then that she had plans far bigger than enforcing paint colors. The first real sign something was wrong happened during an HOA meeting I forced myself to attend after receiving 3 passive-aggressive reminders in the mail. The meeting room inside the clubhouse smelled like burned coffee and printer ink. I sat near the back, sipping water from a paper cup, trying to stay awake, as Delilah droned on about holiday banner sizes and hedge trimming safety. Then she cleared her throat and moved to the infrastructure enhancement proposal. Her words sounded polished, rehearsed. Something about upgrading drainage paths, modernizing underground utilities, and optimizing land usage for the benefit of the entire community. Most people nodded along. One man clapped. I stared at the blueprint, projected onto the screen lines, grids, shapes, none of which made any damn sense to me. But then she said a phrase that jolted me upright. Some access will be required through older easement zones behind certain lots, including Lot 27. Lot 27 was my house. I raised a hand. What kind of access? Delilah gave me that smile, the one that never reached her eyes. Oh, just temporary work behind your property line. Nothing that will affect your home. Can we see the detailed plans? I asked. They're still under review, she replied instantly. Too quickly. Another red flag. After the meeting, Tom caught up with me in the parking lot. He shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and said, "Keith, something's off. She's been talking to the contractor reps more than usual. Real secretive stuff." "Yeah," I muttered, I noticed. "You think this is just drainage upgrades?" "I don't know, Tom. But when Delilah says, "Trust me," that's when I trust her the least. We both laughed, but there was a heaviness behind it. Over the next few weeks, Delilah and the board kept pushing for this infrastructure project, but no one, not one single homeowner, was shown a full set of plans. All we got were pretty diagrams with blue arrows and vague labels like Future Improvement Zone. Meanwhile, I began noticing strange things around my yard. Flags and paint marks appeared behind my fence, fluorescent pink, the exact shade of Delilah's blazer. One morning, I caught two men with measuring equipment pacing along the back edge of my property. "What are you doing?" I asked, stepping outside. "HOA Assessment 1 replied without looking up. "Assessment for what utility alignment?" I looked past them and noticed something odd. Their equipment was pointed not toward the street but toward my house. When I questioned them again, they simply said, "Talk to your HOA president," and drove off. That night in bed, I heard the faint vibration again, like a distant engine. My house had always been silent enough to hear the refrigerator cycle on. This was new. Over the next several days, the vibrations grew more consistent. Sometimes rhythmic tap, 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 other times like a low grumble. The first crack appeared in the basement wall near the foundation seam. Hairline at first. The next day it was twice as long. Dust began collecting in small piles under the crack, a sign something was shifting beneath the concrete. I tried ignoring it, told myself it was settling. Old houses do that right. But then HOA sent me a letter, a thick envelope, instead of the usual flimsy one. Inside was a structural integrity concern notice, stating that my house may pose a risk to community property values and that HOA strongly recommends allowing a board-approved inspector to evaluate sub-foundation stability. I knew exactly what this was, a setup, a push to get inside my house, and the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. I refused access. 2 days later, Delilah herself came knocking. She had a folder tucked under her arm, her hair perfectly sprayed into place. "Keith," she said sweetly, "I'm concerned about your home." "Are you?" I replied, blocking half the doorway with my body. "We've received reports of unusual movement. As HOA president, it's my duty to ensure the safety of all residents. If something is wrong with your foundation, we need to act quickly. My foundation was fine until a month ago." She blinked, taken aback for half a second, before regaining her composure. "Well, things age. So does common sense, but you don't see everyone losing it." Her smile twitched. "Keith refusing an inspection may be considered non-cooperative under Section 14B of the Community Code." "That's funny," I said. "I don't remember signing anything giving you the right to inspect my home whenever you feel like it." Her lips pressed into a flat line. "Keith, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I closed the door. Hard. And as the lock clicked into place, a chill crawled up my spine. Because by then, the vibrations under my house had grown strong enough to make the floorboards tremble. Something was happening down there. And Delilah knew exactly what it was. The night I truly realized something was wrong started with a thud strong enough to shake a picture frame off my living room wall. I was sitting in my recliner trying to ignore the constant vibrations under the floorboards when the whole house shivered like a truck had slammed into the side of it. I jumped up, heart pounding, and rushed to the basement. The air felt different down there. Stale, warm, almost breathing. A faint draft brushed against my legs as I descended the wooden stairs. The light bulb flickered, then steadied, illuminating the concrete walls and the fine powder of dust blanketing the floor. The crack I'd been monitoring for days had doubled again. A thin line, but deep. Too deep. I crouched beside it, running my fingers along the edge. The concrete was cool, but the draft coming through was warm, almost humid, like someone exhaling into the foundation of my home. A house doesn't breathe. People do. "So this is how it starts," I muttered. I leaned closer, hesitated for a second, then pressed my ear against the floor. Tap, 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 whirr. It wasn't settling. It wasn't pipes. Someone somewhere beneath me was digging. I shot up to my feet, anger and unease twisted together in my chest. Delilah. Of course it had to be Delilah. For years, she'd tried controlling how tall my grass could grow or how long I could leave my truck in the driveway. But digging under my home, it felt insane, impossible, criminal. And yet my house was shaking. I spent the next day doing what any normal person would do, trying not to lose my mind. I checked my water meter, gas lines, even called the city utilities department. They confirmed there was no construction scheduled anywhere near my property. No maintenance, no pipe replacement, nothing. "Are you sure?" I asked the woman on the phone. No underground work of any kind, sir, she said firmly. If anyone is digging under your property, they are doing it without city authorization. That sentence hung in the air long after I ended the call. Without authorization, that meant illegal. And illegal in my neighborhood almost always meant HOA related. The next night, the noise grew louder. This time, it wasn't a subtle vibration. I could feel the rhythm of shovels striking dirt. The basement walls hummed like a living creature. I stood in the middle of the room, listening, frozen in place. Then it happened again. Thud. This one came from directly under my feet. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over a box of old tools. And that's when I saw it, something new, something I hadn't noticed before. In the back corner of the room where the floor met the wall, the concrete was bulging upward just slightly but unmistakably. A small mound of displaced soil had begun to form beside the seam. Okay, nope, not normal, I said aloud, though no one was there to hear me. Dust drifted down from the ceiling, joists sprinkling over my shoulders like ash. I grabbed a flashlight and approached the bulge. The soil was fresh, still damp. When I touched it, the warmth startled me. Freshly dug dirt doesn't stay warm for long unless someone was currently beneath it. A bead of sweat crept down my spine. My hands shook, but I grabbed a trowel from my toolbox and began scraping at the mound. The loose soil gave way easily, sliding aside like it had been pushed up only moments earlier. After a few minutes of digging, the flashlight beam caught something that made my stomach drop. A gap, a hole the size of my fist. The dirt collapsed inward as I cleared more of it, and soon I could see down into darkness, a narrow vertical opening, descending at least 3 or 4 feet before turning into what looked like a horizontal tunnel. A tunnel under my house. I sat back, breath shallow. For a long moment, all I could do was stare into the void beneath my foundation. Then the anger rose again, hot and sharp. Well, Delilah, you finally lost your damn mind, I whispered. But curiosity overrode caution. I wasn't about to wait for my house to cave in around me. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I grabbed a coil of rope, tied one end to a structural beam, looped the flashlight around my wrist, and lowered myself into the hole. The air grew warmer. As I descended, the smell of fresh dirt and diesel fuel mixing in a suffocating blend. My boots hit the bottom with a soft crunch. I crouched, shining the light ahead. A tunnel stretched forward, narrow, uneven, but undeniably man-made. Wooden supports lined the walls, crudely hammered into place. The flashlight beam danced across discarded water bottles, muddy boot prints, a half-eaten energy bar. Multiple people had been down here. Recently. This is insanity, I muttered, taking a cautious step forward. I followed the tunnel for 10 yards, maybe more. It curved slightly, then opened into a larger chamber, a hollowed-out pocket reinforced with planks. The ceiling was low. I had to hunch to avoid scraping it. In the center of the chamber sat a small generator, one of those compact construction models. It hummed softly, powering a set of work lamps clipped to rebar hammered into the dirt walls. The orange glow cast long shadows across coils of extension cords, a stack of plywood, and what looked like survey equipment. But the thing that made my heart stop was sitting on a wooden crate near the wall. A rolled blueprint. I lifted it with trembling fingers. The paper smelled like dirt and chemicals. The corner of the page bore an unmistakable stamp: Graywood Estates Homeowners Association, Infrastructure Expansion Plan, authorized by President Delilah Gray. I stood, frozen, the generator humming behind me. Every thought in my head went silent. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't a misunderstanding. My HOA president had signed off on a construction project underneath my home, without permission, without permits, without notifying the city. I swallowed hard, adrenaline hammering through my veins. That's when I heard it, voices echoing down the tunnel. I killed the flashlight, instantly plunging the chamber into flickering generator-lit shadows. I ducked behind a stack of support beams, heart racing. The voices grew louder. Just need another 20 feet today, one said. Male voice. Rough, tired. That's pushing it, another replied. We're already under the slab of lot 27. If this shifts, the whole thing could collapse. And then I heard the unmistakably sharp-clipped voice of Delilah Gray. We don't have time for excuses. The sooner we get through this section, the sooner we can demonstrate the structural risk and move forward with the condemnation process. My blood ran cold. Condemnation. They were planning to declare my home unsafe, to take control, to force a buyout, to get my property for pennies. Delilah stepped into the chamber, her shadow stretching long across the dirt. She wore a reflective vest over her pink blazer like she was cosplaying as a construction manager. "Just finish this phase," she ordered. Once the city inspector sees the stress fractures, she stopped. The blueprint was no longer where she'd left it. Someone had moved it. Someone had been here. Her flashlight beam swept the chamber. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Then, with one wrong breath, one tiny shift of my boot on the dirt floor, a pebble rolled. Delilah's head snapped toward my hiding spot. "Who's there?" she barked. Her voice bounced off the walls, echoing straight through my chest. I knew then whatever happened next would change everything. I held my breath so tightly my chest ached. The chamber fell into a thick, heavy silence, just the hum of the generator, the flutter of loose dust drifting through the air, and Delilah Gray's sharp voice slicing through the darkness. "Richard," she whispered harshly. "Check that corner." Richard Hayes, the civil engineer hired by the HOA, hesitated. I could hear the tremble in his voice. "Delilah, if someone's down here, this is—" Now she snapped. His boots crunched against the dirt as he moved closer to the stack of wooden beams I was hiding behind. I crawled backward as quietly as I could, my palms slipping on gritty soil. There was nowhere to go, just one tunnel leading back under my house, and Richard standing between me and it. If he saw me, they would corner me down here with no witnesses, no escape, and a whole unstable tunnel that could collapse with one wrong move. The beam of Richard's flashlight swept across the chamber. Its glow washed over the generator, the support braces, the hanging tools, then slipped dangerously close to my face, before skimming past my boot by less than an inch. "Nothing here," he said shakily. "Probably just a stone falling." Delilah didn't sound convinced. "Someone's been in this chamber, Richard. Someone moved my plans." Well, maybe one of the crew, no." Her voice hardened like concrete. "No one touches project documents." I made that abundantly clear. She walked toward the far wall, heels sinking into the dirt, and grabbed the blueprint tube I'd set back down. She unrolled it violently, scanning the edges. These weren't curled like this before. Richard sighed. "Delilah, seriously, you're tracking paper curl now. We need to slow down. The stress meters were already spiking this morning. If we keep excavating—" She whirled on him. "We proceed," she hissed. "We need visible damage. We need city inspectors to see the cracks. And we need it soon before Keith Wood realizes." She stopped again. Her words echoed around us. They were expecting me to eventually suspect something, but they didn't know I was already in the room. My pulse hammered so loud I was terrified she'd hear it. My fingers wrapped around the handle of a metal level resting on the ground beside me, clumsy as a weapon but better than nothing. Richard scrubbed a hand across his face. "Delilah, I'm telling you this is illegal on every level imaginable. We have no permit, we falsified consent forms, and we're under someone's home. If this goes bad, it's prison time." She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice into a venomous whisper. "That's exactly why you're not backing out. You're in this now. So pick up your equipment and let's get this done." He didn't respond. I could feel the shift in the room, the tension, the fear, the resentment from Richard, the desperation from Delilah. This wasn't just overreach. It was a full-blown criminal conspiracy. I needed to get out. Now. As their argument continued, I slid along the dirt floor, inching toward the tunnel leading back under my house. Richard's flashlight beam passed over the chamber again, and I ducked, low heart slamming against my ribs. "Fine," he muttered. "But we're reinforcing the north brace before digging another inch. The readings are bad. The soil composition is unstable." Delilah scoffed. "My uncle built a wine cellar under his house without half this fuss." "This isn't a wine cellar, Delilah. This is a 40-foot unauthorized excavation." I kept crawling backward until my hand brushed the rope I'd anchored above. Almost there. Then the worst happened. A clump of dirt slid under my knee and tumbled down the slight incline toward them, pattering like rainfall. Delilah spun around instantly. "There, someone is definitely down here." Richard swung the flashlight in my direction. The beam landed on dirt at first, then on the rope, then right on me. For one frozen heartbeat, we simply stared at each other, three people in a half-built underground cavern, all equally shocked for different reasons. Keith Wood, supposed to be helpless homeowner. Richard Hayes, panicked engineer. Delilah Gray, queen of the HOA underworld. And I had just caught them in the act. What the Keith Richard blurted out, face draining of color. Delilah's jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. "You," she seethed. I scrambled to my feet, gripping the metal level like a makeshift club. She took a step forward. "You have no business being here. You're digging under my house," I shouted. Richard raised his hands. Keith, just calm down, I snapped. You're tunneling under my property without permits, without consent, and you think I'm the one who needs to calm down, Delilah pointed at me. You are trespassing in an active construction zone. I almost laughed. Trespassing, under my own house, she didn't flinch. You signed the easement authorization. No, I growled, stepping forward. I damn well didn't. Her expression twitched a microscopic crack in her mask. Richard took a cautious step between us. Keith, listen, we didn't mean for any damage. You already caused damage, I snapped. You've undermined the slab. You cracked my foundation. You risked collapsing my property for what, so HOA can claim my house is unsafe and take it. Delilah's lips curled. You're being dramatic, am I? Because I found this. I held up the blueprint I'd tucked partially into my jacket. Her face drained of color. You stole HOA property, she said sharply. You broke the law, I shot back. Multiple laws. And I'm betting the city, the county, and the state will be very interested in this. Delilah stepped closer, lowering her voice dangerously. Keith, think carefully about what you're doing. Oh, I have, I said. Every vibration, every crack in my basement, every strange marking behind my fence. I've been thinking real hard. She stiffened, realizing threats weren't working. If you expose this, you'll create chaos for the entire community. I scoffed. You mean, expose what you did to the community? Richard looked between us helplessly. Delilah, let him quiet, she snapped. That was the moment I realized she was cornered, not physically but strategically. I had her blueprint. I had her caught underground. I had her acknowledging the project existed. She had no way to spin this cleanly. So she reached for the only weapon she had left. Keith, she said through clenched teeth, if you walk out of here, you will regret it. The threat hung in the air, heavy as the soil above us. I took a step back toward the rope. Funny. That's exactly what I was planning to tell you. Then I turned, grabbed the rope, and climbed upward with every ounce of strength I had left. Richard shouted something. Delilah screamed my name, but I didn't stop. I scrambled up the shaft, dirt collapsing under my boots, flashlight bouncing wildly from my wrist. My hands clawed at the basement floor edge before I finally hauled myself out. I collapsed onto the concrete, gasping, covered in dirt and sweat. Below me, I could hear Delilah shrieking orders. Block that entrance, seal it. Now he cannot leave with those documents. But I wasn't sticking around. I staggered to my feet, wiped the dirt from my eyes, and sprinted up the stairs into my living room. My hands shook as I locked the basement door, then jammed a chair under the handle for good measure, even though I knew the underground entrance was the only way in or out. I leaned against the wall, catching my breath. My HOA president had been caught red-handed building a secret tunnel under my house. And now, she knew I knew. The war had officially begun. When the adrenaline began to settle and my heartbeat stopped slamming against my ribs, the reality of what just happened crashed down on me like a collapsing wall of bricks. My HOA president, Delilah Gray, was somewhere underneath my home at that very moment, screaming orders to her engineer to seal a secret tunnel they dug illegally. And I'd walked out with physical evidence of their entire operation. I wasn't just dealing with a petty HOA dispute anymore. This was criminal, dangerous, and deeply personal. I paced my living room, dirt falling from my clothes in clumps. My palms were shaking so badly I almost dropped the blueprint. I forced myself to stop and breathe, leaning on the dining table as I unrolled the plans again. Stamped in the corner, Graywood Estates Homeowners Association. Phase 2, Expansion Blueprint. Signed President Delilah Gray. There were diagrams showing the existing structures proposed, utility corridors, and access shafts, none of which were anywhere near permitted or legal. And the most damning part was a handwritten note in the margin: Lot 27 sub-foundation weak in areas, easier to influence inspector's report. Influence. Inspector. Weak. They wanted my house to fail. They wanted my home condemned, so the HOA could wrap the land into their amenities expansion plan. They'd probably turn my backyard into a dog park or a walking trail and brag that it was for community improvement. No, not on my watch. I grabbed my phone and did the first smart thing I could think of. I called Tom Barrett. He answered on the second ring. Keith, it's almost 10. Everything okay? No, I said, still breathless. I need you, now, and bring your camera. What happened I'll explain when you get here. The less said over the phone, the better. Tom lived 4 houses down and showed up in under 2 minutes wearing a hoodie and holding the largest flashlight I'd ever seen. When I opened the door, his eyes widened. Jesus, Keith, you look like you crawled out of a grave. Close enough. I locked the door behind him and pulled him into the kitchen where I rolled out the blueprint across the counter. His face went pale. What am I looking at? You're looking at why my house has been shaking for weeks." He stared at the maze of lines, arrows, and measurements. "They dug under your house, and they're still down there." A long, horrified silence stretched between us. Tom finally whispered, "Keith, this is insane. That's one word for it. Call the police." "I will, but I need evidence they can't explain away. They'll try to spin it. Say I misinterpreted. Say I stole HOA documents." "You did steal HOA documents." I gave him a sharp look. "I recovered stolen property they hid under my house." He nodded. "Fair. And I need city inspectors to see the tunnel before Delilah manages to bury the entrance or claim it never existed." Tom rubbed his forehead. "Okay, so what's the plan?" "Step 1. We document every inch of this basement." Truthfully, I didn't know what step 2 or 3 were yet, but I knew step 1 was crucial. We went downstairs, me leading the way with a flashlight, Tom carrying his phone and a small GoPro he used for hiking. The moment he saw the bulging concrete and the exposed hole, he cursed under his breath. "Oh my God, Keith." "Yeah." We spent nearly half an hour recording every angle, cracks in the walls, soil displacement, drill marks, bits of machinery that had been left behind. Tom crawled close to the hole and held his phone down, filming the tunnel's sloping descent. "I can't believe this is happening," he whispered. "They're absolutely screwed." "Not yet," I muttered. "Not until we make sure they can't hide any of it." The sound of distant shouting suddenly echoed up the tunnel. We both froze. Tom whispered, "Are they still down there?" "Yep, and they're trying to cover their tracks." The muffled voices were frantic, angry, strained. I heard Delilah bark something like, "Hurry, reinforce that side," followed by Richard yelling, "This soil is unstable, stop rushing me, let's get back upstairs," I said quietly. "Before they try something stupid." We climbed back up and shut the basement door again. "Now what?" Tom asked. "I call a structural engineer. Tonight, yes. Actually, right now." I searched online for emergency foundation inspection services, found one with 24/7 availability, and dialed. A tired-sounding man named Greg Saunders picked up. I explained very briefly that I suspected severe foundation instability. He said, "Cracks expanding quickly, vibration, soil movement, all of it. I'll be there within an hour." As soon as I hung up, Tom said, "Keith, we need more than just him. We need someone official." "I know." I opened my email and began typing to the city's building safety division. I attached 3 of Tom's clearest photos and explained that something was compromising my foundation and growth of underground cavities was suspected. I didn't mention the tunnel yet. I wanted a formal inspector on site before HOA could lawyer their way around it. Next, we needed an attorney. A neighbor had once mentioned a lawyer who handled HOA disputes, Evan Turner. I found his website and filled out an emergency contact form. Then I wrote, "This is not a typical HOA dispute. This is a structural endangerment and possible criminal matter. Contact me as soon as possible." When I hit send, Tom let out a breath. "You're serious about this?" "Tom, they tried to collapse my house." "I'm dead serious." Within 20 minutes, headlights pulled into my driveway. Greg, the structural engineer. He stepped out carrying a hard case of equipment. A tall, slightly balding man in his 50s with deep-set eyes that looked like they'd seen too many basements at 3 a.m. "You, Keith?" he asked. "Yes. Show me." I brought him inside and Tom followed. When Greg saw the basement, he didn't so much gasp as exhale like a man who'd just discovered a gas leak under a daycare. "Jesus," he muttered. "This is bad. This is very bad." He set up sensors, scanned the floor, took photos, measured vibration. He knelt beside the bulge in the slab, touching the warm soil with gloved fingers. "This wasn't natural movement," he said. "This is excavation stress." I nodded grimly. "Look down the hole." He did, and he froze mid-breath. "That's a tunnel," he said quietly. "A tunnel dug without permit or safety clearance," I said. Greg closed his eyes for a moment, then stood up. "I'm calling this in. This is a level 4 hazard, potential risk of collapse. Keith, you cannot use this basement. You should avoid walking over this area on the ground floor if possible. The soil load is inconsistent." Tom looked at me, face pale. Greg kept going. "I'll file the mandatory report with the city after I leave. They will send inspectors within the next 24-48 hours. Possibly sooner." That was exactly what I needed. But before Greg left, something unexpected happened. As he was packing up, he suddenly cocked his head. "Did you hear that?" he asked. We all went silent. At first nothing. Then clank, clank, thud, the unmistakable sound of tools being used underneath my house. Greg stared at me. "There are people down there." "Yes," I said. "My HOA." His jaw tightened. Then this is worse than I thought. If they're altering the cavity while I'm taking readings, they're endangering the entire load distribution. I hope they understand they're risking lives. They don't care, I said. But they will. Greg left after issuing strict instructions: stay upstairs, avoid the basement, and expect city inspectors very soon. Tom sat with me at the kitchen table afterward. Both of us exhausted, both of us reeling. You just declared war on the HOA, he said. No, I corrected. They declared war on me when they started digging under my house. He nodded slowly. So what's next? I looked at the blueprint, at the cracks, at the basement door, and I answered, next I make sure Delilah Gray never abuses power in this neighborhood again. Sleep became impossible that night. Every time the house creaked, every time a distant vibration whispered through the floorboards, I jolted awake. I kept imagining the tunnel suddenly collapsing, the slab giving way, the entire house folding inward like a cardboard box. But beneath that, fear was something colder, sharper: anger. Delilah Gray hadn't just trespassed under my home. She'd gambled with my safety. She'd gambled with my property, my security, my life. And she thought she could get away with all of it behind the shiny shield of an HOA title. Not anymore. By morning, the blueprint was neatly rolled and secured in a fireproof document bag. The videos and photos Tom and I took were backed up on 2 drives and a cloud folder under a disguised name. I wasn't giving Delilah any chance to bury this literally or figuratively. Around 8 a.m., there was a knock on my door. For a split second, I feared it was Delilah ready to unleash hell, but when I looked through the peephole, I exhaled with relief. It was Evan Turner, the HOA lawyer I'd contacted the night before. Tall, mid-40s, sharp suit, and the look of a man who spent his life dissecting fine print like it owed him money. When I opened the door, he gave one glance at my stressed face and nodded knowingly. "You're Keith," he said, "and I'm guessing this isn't a routine fence height violation." I stepped aside. "You have no idea." He set his leather briefcase down at the kitchen table and folded his hands. "Explain everything from the beginning." So I did. Every detail. The vibrations, the cracks, the tunnel, the chamber, Richard's objections, Delilah's threats, the blueprint, the noise under the basement, Greg's emergency assessment. Evan listened without interrupting once, though his eyebrows lifted significantly when I got to the part about Delilah forging the easement consent form I'd never signed. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "Keith, this is a full-blown catastrophe. For them, good," I muttered. He opened his briefcase, pulled out a legal pad, and began listing items with quick, controlled strokes. "We have criminal trespass, fraud, forgery, unlicensed excavation, endangerment, structural sabotage, violation of building codes, possibly extortion depending on her intent with this condemnation scheme. There's also insanity," I added. "Does that count legally?" He cracked the smallest smile. "Not in the courts, but it will help your case." He then pulled out a thick binder titled State HOA Statutes and Regulatory Obligations. "HOAs have power, Keith," he said, flipping pages. "But they also have strict boundaries. Digging under a private home without explicit consent or municipal permit, that crosses more lines than I can count. I want them held accountable," I said firmly. "All of them." "When we're done," he replied, "Delilah will wish she'd never run for HOA president." Evan paused before asking, "Has the city inspector contacted you yet?" "Not yet. They will. Greg's report is considered urgent." Right on cue, my phone buzzed. A city number. I answered instantly. "Mr. Wood, this is Inspector Matthew Cole from the Building Safety Division. We received an emergency structural alert regarding your property." "Yes, sir. We'll be on site within the next 2 hours. Do not enter the basement until then." "I won't." After I hung up, Evan looked at me carefully. "Okay, this is how we play it." He then laid out a plan so methodical and sharp that any HOA board would shiver if they heard it. Step 1. Let the city document the tunnel as an official hazard. Step 2. Do not engage Delilah directly no matter what she says or threatens. Step 3. Preserve all evidence and avoid letting anyone from the HOA onto my property. Step 4. File a civil injunction to freeze all HOA construction activity. Step 5. Initiate a forensic document analysis on the forged easement form. Step 6. Prepare for a lawsuit that would not only bring down Delilah but also any board member who voted for the excavation project. I nodded through each step, feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Control. A little after 10 a.m., 2 city vehicles pulled into my driveway. Inspector Cole stepped out mid-50 seconds, intense eyes, clipboard ready, and behind him a younger assistant carrying a digital scanner. "Mr. Wood," Cole said, shaking my hand. "I understand we have a serious issue." "More than serious," I replied. "Follow me." Evan remained by my side as we led them down to the basement. Cole crouched by the bulging slab, his expression tightening. "Jesus," he muttered. "This is an active void." He tapped the concrete. It echoed faintly. "Hollow." The assistant scanned the floor with a ground-penetrating radar device. The screen lit up with red and blue pockets, air gaps, disturbed earth, unsupported soil. Cole's jaw hardened. "There's a tunnel under here." I nodded. "A big one. We'll need to access it." Evan cleared his throat. "For safety, my client will not descend again. You can approach from the opening there." Cole peeked into the access hole, shining his flashlight downward. His face went pale. "This is extensive." He turned to me. "Do you know who did this?" Evan stepped forward smoothly. "Mr. Wood will provide all relevant documentation after your inspection is complete." Translation: get the evidence recorded first, then detonate the bomb. Cole nodded and directed his assistant to photograph and measure everything. After nearly 40 minutes, he stood up. "Mr. Wood," Cole said gravely, "this structure is not safe. We're issuing an emergency stop work order for any excavation in this neighborhood until we determine the origin of this tunnel. You're also prohibited from using your basement until further notice." "That's fine with me," I said. "The people who dug it are the ones you want." Cole looked confused, but Evan gave him a reassuring nod. "You'll understand soon." Right as the inspectors were packing up, the moment I had been bracing for finally arrived. A sharp knock on the front door. Hard. Aggressive. "Let me guess," I muttered. "Pink blazer." Sure enough, when I opened the door, Delilah Gray stood on my porch, perfectly coiffed, lips pressed tight, holding a clipboard, like she intended to beat someone with it. Behind her stood 2 HOA board members, looking nervous and out of breath. "Keith," she said coldly, "we need to speak." Evan stepped beside me. "No, you don't." Delilah blinked, surprised. "And you are his attorney." The clipboard in her hand trembled just slightly. "This is HOA business," she insisted, trying to regain control. "Mr. Wood is required to Mr. Secant by word." Wood, Evan interrupted calmly, "is required to do exactly nothing except follow city orders, which he is already doing. And you, Miss Gray, are trespassing." Delilah's face flushed. "You cannot forbid an HOA president from addressing a community issue, Cole." The inspector approached the doorway. "Ma'am," he said sternly, "I'm Inspector Cole with the City Building Safety Division. We've issued an emergency stop work order on all underground activity and will be conducting an investigation." Delilah's lips parted. "Stop. Work. Yes," he said. "Are you aware of a tunnel beneath this home?" She opened her mouth, but Evan cut in. "Miss Gray will refrain from answering pending legal counsel." Cole frowned. "Legal counsel?" "On a building code violation inquiry," Evan smiled. "You'll see soon enough." Delilah swallowed hard. For the first time since she'd become HOA president, she looked afraid. I crossed my arms, meeting her eyes. "You dug under the wrong house, Delilah." Her jaw tightened. "This isn't over," she whispered. "Oh, it's very over," Evan said. "Just not for us." Delilah turned sharply and marched down my driveway, her board members scrambling behind her. Tom, who had been standing in the hallway silently this whole time, leaned in and whispered, "She walks like she just lost a battle." I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "She just realized she's about to lose a war." Delilah's heels clicked away down my driveway, like the ticking of a time bomb, one she'd built herself, and suddenly realized was about to blow up in her face. I watched her turn the corner, the 2 board members trailing behind her like frightened ducklings, and I felt something I hadn't felt since this nightmare started. Momentum. For once, the storm wasn't rolling over me. It was rolling toward her. Evan closed the door behind us and motioned toward the living room. "Keith, things are moving quickly now, which is good, but it also means she's going to get desperate." "Oh, I'm counting on it," I replied. Before we could say more, my phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. I opened it and felt a surge in my chest. "It's the inspector's preliminary report," I said. Already, Evan leaned over my shoulder to read. The document contained photographs, soil, void analyses, radar scans, structural hazard warnings, and a recommendation for immediate investigation into unauthorized excavation by unknown parties. Unknown parties for now. Evan tapped the screen. "This is perfect. It's not the final report, but this is enough for an injunction." He grabbed his briefcase. "I'll head to the courthouse and file it." They'll freeze every HOA construction project immediately. Even the ones above ground, especially the ones above ground, he answered. If Delilah had any other scheme cooking, she's about to find out her entire operation is on ice. He paused at the door. Stay put. Don't speak to the HOA. Don't answer any letters or emails from them. And lock your doors. Will do. After Evan drove off, the quiet inside my house felt different. Not the uneasy silence from the night before, but the heavy calm before someone swings a gavel and changes everything. Tom poked his head into the living room. He'd stayed to help me process everything. What now? He asked. Now, I said, we wait for Delilah to make her next mistake. He chuckled. That won't take long. He was right. It took 43 minutes. There was a sudden pounding on my front door, 3 loud bangs followed by the grating voice of a woman whose ego had been bruised for the first time in years. Keith Wood, open this door right now. Tom raised an eyebrow. She came back. That didn't take long at all. I peeked through the blinds and nearly laughed. Delilah was standing there with 3 more HOA board members, one holding a stack of documents like they were about to serve me royal decrees. I didn't open the door. Instead, I cracked a window 2 inches. You're trespassing on my property again, I called out. Leave. You cannot refuse an HOA compliance review, she shouted. I can when the HOA is under investigation. The board members turned to look at her. She snapped at them to face forward. Keith, she hissed, lowering her voice. If you don't cooperate, I will have no choice but to. To what I asked sharply. Dig a second tunnel. She froze. The board members stared at her with growing horror. You told me it was a service corridor, stammered one of them. A tall man named Stewart who always avoided eye contact at community meetings. Delilah whipped around to silence him, but it was too late. Another board member, Linda, stepped forward holding her clipboard like a shield. Delilah, please tell me you didn't authorize excavation under someone's private home without their consent. Delilah's face twitched. It was strategic planning, Linda snapped. You forged the expansion vote, didn't you? Her voice cracked, devastated. You told us the vote was unanimous. You said every homeowner agreed. Tom whispered behind me. Looks like the board's cracking. I folded my arms. Unless you have a warrant or a city inspector with you, you're done here. Delilah lunged toward the window. Keith, I am ordering you, Delilah, I said calmly. The city inspector already knows it was your tunnel. And my lawyer just filed a freeze on all HOA activity. Her jaw dropped. You went to the city without notifying the HOA first, I nearly burst out laughing. Delilah, you dug under my house. You don't get notifications anymore. The board descended into confused whispers. Delilah spun around, furious. We're leaving, she snapped. Then she turned back to me with venom dripping from every syllable. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I replied. You just don't know it yet. Tom grinned as they scurried away. That went beautifully. Almost too beautifully. Now what? We wait for the fallout. The fallout came the next morning, loud, chaotic, and spectacular. At 9:12 a.m., a convoy of city vehicles pulled into the neighborhood. Building inspectors, code enforcement officers, and most satisfying of all, the city zoning compliance chief. Half the neighborhood came outside to watch. People whispered, dogs barked, curtains fluttered. The inspection team walked straight to the HOA clubhouse. Delilah, seeing them arrive, rushed outside wearing a blazer that looked like it had been ironed 20 times that morning from stress. She intercepted the officials, speaking quickly, hands flailing. But the zoning chief held up a hand sharply. Miss Gray, he said loud enough. For half the block to hear, we need access to the HOA records, excavation plans, and board vote documentation regarding recent underground activities. You could practically hear the sound of her soul leaving her body. There must be some misunderstanding, she tried. There is no misunderstanding, the chief replied firmly. You are under investigation for unpermitted excavation, structural endangerment, and possible land use violations. Neighbors gasped. Someone actually cheered. Tom nudged me. I'll give you $100 if she faints. She didn't faint, but she came close. She shook her head repeatedly. We weren't digging anything. At that moment, Inspector Cole walked up holding the preliminary report. It was traced to HOA equipment and materials. We have photographic evidence. The board members behind Delilah looked horrified. Stewart whispered, She lied to us. Linda covered her mouth, tears forming. The zoning chief continued, Miss Gray, if you cannot present the permits required for such activity, you may be personally liable. Delilah's face twisted into a desperate snarl. And then she made the biggest mistake of her life. She yelled loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear, Fine, yes, I ordered the tunnel, but it was for the good of the community. A dead silence washed over the crowd. She realized what she had said 1 second too late. The zoning chief blinked slowly. Thank you. That confession will be added to the case file. Tom almost fell over from trying not to laugh. I didn't bother holding it in. I let out a breath that was half relief, half triumph. Delilah stumbled back, trembling. You tricked me. No, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. Within minutes, investigators entered the HOA office and began confiscating boxes of documents. Reporters arrived soon after, alerted by someone who apparently had sent them tips the night before. I'll neither confirm nor deny who that someone was. Neighbors surrounded me, firing questions. Keith, is it true she dug under your house? Did she really forge permits? Are we still paying HOA dues for this mess? Is the tunnel big, like movie big? I lifted my hands. Folks, let the investigators do their job. I'll have more to say when everything is official. But inside, I felt something powerful rising. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. Not because the tunnel was gone, not yet, but because the truth had finally broken through the soil, and Delilah Gray was sinking fast. The chaos unfolding in front of the HOA clubhouse spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People who normally wouldn't bother waving at each other during morning walks were now gathering in small crowds, murmuring, pointing, whispering like they were watching the finale of a TV drama filmed right in their cul-de-sac. And honestly, I couldn't blame them. This wasn't a petty fine. This wasn't a noisy neighbor dispute. This was their HOA president confessing to orchestrating a secret underground tunnel system beneath a homeowner's foundation. A homeowner who happened to have zero patience left to spare. I watched as zoning officials hauled out more files, more ledgers, more binders than I thought the HOA even owned. One thick binder had a strip of masking tape labeled Phase 2 Expansion, Confidential. That alone made several neighbors gasp. Tom nudged me. Think that's where they kept the evil master plans. Wouldn't surprise me, I said. Delilah was pacing in circles on the clubhouse lawn, muttering to herself, still trying to maintain an air of control, but it was slipping fast. Sweat had gathered along her hairline, and she kept tugging and smoothing her blazer like it was armor that could somehow protect her from reality. One of the board members, Linda, approached me, cautiously wringing her hands. Keith, I'm so sorry, she whispered, voice trembling. She told us the expansions were approved. She said the city signed off. She said every homeowner had voted yes. She lied, I said simply. Linda looked down. She lied about a lot, didn't she? Yes, I replied. And she put everyone in danger. Her eyes filled with tears. I trusted her. You're not the only one. Behind us, a man shouted. Are my HOA dues paying for that tunnel crap? A second neighbor yelled, do we get refunds? A third, does this mean the pool is canceled again? The situation had turned into a full-on revolt. But the coup de grace came 20 minutes later when a black SUV rolled into the neighborhood. Silent, controlled, unmistakable. Tom whispered, no way. The vehicle door opened. Out stepped Detective Harris, a local investigator known for handling municipal fraud cases. I'd only seen him once in a news segment, but even from that I remembered the look-sharp eyes beneath calm brows, the kind of man who could read your entire moral history just by watching you blink. He approached the zoning chief, exchanged a few quiet words, then turned toward Delilah. Miss Gray, he said firmly, I need you to come with me. That one sentence turned the neighborhood crowd into a collective jaw drop. Delilah took a step back, shaking her head violently. What? No, this is a mistake. I've done nothing illegal. Detective Harris maintained complete composure. You authorized an unpermitted excavation under a private residence. You forged signatures on at least one HOA authorization form, and preliminary evidence suggests misuse of HOA funds. I only did what was necessary for the community. Harris tilted his head slightly. The community disagrees. And for the first time that day, Delilah realized she had no allies left. Not one. Even Stuart, usually timid to the point of invisibility, muttered, You dragged us into this, Delilah. I hope they throw the book at you. That did it. Delilah's last thread of composure snapped. You all benefited from my leadership. You have no idea how hard it is to run this neighborhood. No idea what pressures I deal with. Her voice cracked, desperate. This community needs me. She yelled it like a final plea. The zoning chief responded dryly. The community seems to disagree. And with that, Harris escorted her toward the SUV. She didn't fight, just trembled, still shaking her head in denial. As she passed me, her eyes narrowed, rage swirling beneath the panic. This is your fault, she whispered. I leaned in slightly. No, Delilah, this is yours. The door shut behind her, and the SUV drove off silent again, like the punctuation mark on a sentence years in the making. Neighbors slowly dispersed, some cheering, some stunned, some recording videos, like they had front row seats at the fall of Rome. Tom stood beside me with a deep, satisfied sigh. "You did it, man." "Not yet," I said. "There's still the lawsuit." "Oh yeah," he grinned. Round 2. By noon, Evan returned from the courthouse looking like a man who had just pulled every legal lever available and enjoyed every second of it. "The injunction is approved," he said, stepping into my living room without sitting down. "All HOA activities are frozen. The city is launching a formal investigation. And Delilah will be spending her evening answering some very serious questions." "Good," I said. "What about the board? They'll likely be dissolved." "And the HOA, that depends," Evan said. "If enough neighbors vote to disband it, the city could appoint a third-party manager to unwind it." "What's your recommendation? Burn it to the ground legally," he replied without hesitation. We spent the next hour preparing all the evidence in carefully organized folders, digital and printed. Evan was meticulous, almost surgical. He categorized everything: photos, tunnel schematics, videos, forged signatures, inspector reports. When we finished, he looked up at me with quiet certainty. "Keith," he said, "you're going to win. And not just a little. This is going to set a precedent." I felt something loosen inside me, weeks of fear, frustration, helplessness, melting into a steadier, stronger emotion. Relief. That afternoon, the city posted an official notice on the HOA clubhouse door. HOA, operations suspended pending, investigation. Neighbors gathered around pointing, taking pictures. The empire Delilah built out of arrogance and control had finally collapsed. The board held an emergency meeting on the sidewalk, awkward, disorganized, panicked. Without Delilah's iron fist, they were like kids who'd lost their babysitter. Linda approached me again, this time with a different expression, one of resolve. "Keith," she said, "once this is over, I'll be first to vote for dissolving this whole thing." "Thank you," I said sincerely. "And, for the record," she added quietly, "you did the right thing, even if it was terrifying." I nodded. It was. By evening, the neighborhood felt lighter. People waved more. Kids rode bikes without being scolded about noise regulations. Someone even put up a grill in their driveway, and nobody said a word about smoke compliance. It was like the entire HOA had been suffocating everyone for years without them realizing it. But the day wasn't over yet. At 6:47 p.m., I received a call from Detective Harris. "Mr. Wood," he said, "I thought you should know." Delilah confessed to authorizing the excavation. She also admitted to forging the easement consent form. "We're still gathering details, but she's facing several charges." I closed my eyes, breathing out the longest breath of my life. "Thank you." And he added, "Your willingness to come forward prevented what could have been a structural collapse. You likely saved your own life." That part took me off guard. Saved my own life. Because Delilah didn't care if the tunnel weakened my home. She didn't care if the foundation gave way. She didn't care if I was inside when it happened. But I cared. And I fought back. After I hung up, Tom raised an eyebrow at the look on my face. "Good news. Better than good," I said. "Justice is coming." And for the first time in weeks, it felt like the ground beneath my feet was steady again, not hollow, not shaking, not stolen, just mine. The tunnel would be filled, the HOA would be dismantled, Delilah would face consequences. And my home, my sanctuary for over 20 years, would stand safe again. Tom clapped my shoulder. "So, what now?" I looked around my quiet living room, the evening sun slanting through the blinds, dust motes floating peacefully. Now, I could finally breathe. When everything was said and done, the tunnel under my house became more than evidence, it became a metaphor. Sometimes the things that threaten us most don't come crashing through the front door. They happen quietly beneath the surface, carved by people who believe their position gives them the right to control your life. But the moment you shine a light underground, the truth has nowhere left to hide. This whole ordeal taught me something powerful. You don't beat corruption by being silent. You beat it by standing up, documenting everything, and refusing to let fear make your choices for you. So let me ask you, have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare or a neighbor who crossed the line? Drop your story in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you enjoyed this journey, make sure to subscribe so you never miss what happens in the next HOA meltdown.